Hello, Daniel Leben, the Vice President of International Projects at Sesame Workshops, the nonprofit educational organization that produces Sesame Street and other educational media around the world. Thank you for being here and speaking with us.
Thank you, Netta, and thank you to the Jerusalem Cinematheque and to the Van Leer Foundation and to everyone who's made this week possible to really focus on human mobility and the importance of the topic. I think we all know, based on the events taking place at the moment, that this is just such a critical topic. And thank you for having me.
Thank you. So this is the fourth day of our program, and it's a day focused on children. And we thought that, you know, who would be more appropriate to talk about children in a more creative angle than Sesame Street Workshop and you in your position. So let's start with some background. Tell me a little about Sesame Workshop and what is your role in it?
Great. Sesame Workshop is a nonprofit organization that for now 53 years has been producing Sesame Street around the world, as well as other educational media, really based on the premise that media can have an impact on child development and can be a tool to actually change behaviors and attitudes throughout a child's life. So in my role as the Vice President of International Projects, I am really charged with ensuring that everything we do internationally as part of our social impact work really is designed and produced and distributed in order to deliver educational impact to children in our target age range of children ages 3 to 8.
And how is this different than Sesame Street, the program? Actually, it's the oldest children's program TV show ever, right? Or just in the US, but I think all over the world.
All over the world.
That's amazing. So tell us a bit about the show and how it's different than the Sesame Workshop. Like what's...
Sure.
Yeah.
And it's such an important point of distinction because Sesame Workshop is actually the name of the organization. We're a nonprofit based in New York, and we work all over the world. And Sesame Street is our signature program that is now in its 53rd season in the US. And we've created international adaptations of Sesame Street in multiple countries around the world. Some of the people in the audience today might be familiar with Rexov Sumsum, which is the Israeli adaptation of Sesame Street. Okay, you're smiling, so you clearly remember it. So we actually began co-producing Rexov Sumsum in 1981.
I can start singing the opening anthem.
Go for it, because actually the opening theme song has not changed. We're still airing Rexov Sumsum in partnership with Channel Hope in Israel today. And we're going to be producing some new content this year, which is really, really exciting. And the program in Israel focuses really on issues of social cohesion. And in every place that we work, the curriculum, the characters, everything that we do is really driven by local experts, by local teams, and by the local needs of kids in the place where we're working. So Rexov Sumsum is actually just one example of the many different international programs that we have around the world. Of course, we're really excited that it's been such a popular and pivotal part of children's programming in Israel for so long. The concept of what we do as Sesame Workshop is really to help build the infrastructure for high quality children's educational programming. It was really an amazing experience. Obviously, I wasn't around in the 1980s, but when we partnered with IETV, Televizia Chinuchit, to really try to shape that. And there's such a robust landscape of children's programming today and so many channels. And I think it really is, in many ways, an outgrowth of some of that early work almost 40 years ago.
Wow, amazing. And how did Sesame Workshop begin the work in immigration and human mobility? How did you think, even start thinking that you can help in this theme or in this sphere?
Well, it is such a big and important topic, and many people don't realize sort of the depth of what Sesame Street programming around the world is able to address. But really our target audience, in addition to it being young children in preschool, has always been about reaching the most marginalized children who are in the greatest need of educational content. And in the world today, there are unfortunately a lot of very pressing issues, but one of the most pressing issues is the issue of migration and forced displacement, and children who are growing up in circumstances that are extremely difficult, often afflicted by crisis and conflict. And so based on the work that Sesame Workshop had done in multiple countries around the world, examining content and producing Sesame Street projects for children living in active conflict, whether it's the work that we did in Israel with Palestinian, Israeli, and Jordanian production teams about 15 years ago, or subsequent work that we did in Kosovo and in Northern Ireland to help bridge divides for children. We knew that we could tackle really difficult topics for children who were in need of educational content. And so we decided about 6 years ago that we would partner with the International Rescue Committee, which is one of the largest international NGOs working in many places around the world. It was actually founded by Albert Einstein more than 100 years ago. And we decided to partner with them to be able to deliver educational media content to children who had been displaced by the ongoing conflict in Syria. Just in that conflict alone, more than 12 million people have been displaced, and approximately 5 million of those are children, and are all growing up in a scenario marked by tremendous stress. And so we partnered with the IRC. We weren't sure exactly what that would look like. At the World Humanitarian Summit that took place in Istanbul in 2016, we announced this partnership, and we very quickly were able to bring together some seed funding to pilot some work in refugee contexts. So we had seed funding from the Open Societies Foundation and from the Bernard Van Leer Foundation, which enabled us to take Sesame Street content into refugee camps in Jordan. And we were able to see what an incredible impact the Muppet characters and the content had on children who may not have ever seen Sesame Street before and may not have even watched much television, but who had an immediate reaction to seeing the Sesame characters. And so we became even more convinced that there was something huge that we could do. And so, I'm sorry, this is a really long answer, but hopefully it helps people understand sort of how we got into this space. We decided that we would do something really bold and audacious. And so together with the International Rescue Committee, we applied to a competition that was being held by the MacArthur Foundation, which is a major family foundation based in Chicago. And they were holding a competition called 100 and Change. And the premise was that they would grant $100 million to any initiative that had the potential to make a lasting impact on the world. It was very broad. And so we applied, and there were over 1,000 organizations and initiatives that were a part of the competition initially, and it was narrowed down to 8. And in the end, the partnership between us, Sesame Workshop, and the International Rescue Committee was deemed the winner. And it was really, really exciting. And the outgrowth of that has been this multi-year Sesame Street initiative called Ahlan Simsim. You can see featured here behind me. These are some of the characters from Ahlan Simsim. And we now are growing that work in refugee contexts to also address the needs of children in Bangladesh who've been displaced from Myanmar, the Rohingya population. We're also working in East Africa and Latin America, addressing children displaced by the Venezuelan crisis. So we're really working in multiple settings at the moment. And of course, the needs are very different in each of those contexts.
And you wanted to show, right?
I would love to show a segment. This segment actually features two of our newest Muppets. Their names are Noor and Aziz. They were created specifically for the work that we're doing in Bangladesh. And one of the things that we found was how critical it is for children to see themselves reflected on screen and to have that proud depiction of children, even if they're puppets, but who look like them. And so we created these two local characters. They're brother and sister, twins actually, Noor and Aziz, fraternal twins, of course, a boy and a girl. And this clip I thought was really illustrative, and I'm excited to show it because in addition to meeting Noor and Aziz, the characters, it also provides a glimpse into the refugee camp in Bangladesh in a place called Cox's Bazar, which is where actually the largest encampment currently is on Earth, with nearly 1 million people living in really difficult and challenging conditions. And this is the place where we're working in Bangladesh to deliver this content. So it'll be a little bit of a glimpse. It'd be my pleasure to screen that now.
Let's watch it and we'll talk later on.
Okay, great.
Wow, it's touching. So we saw one example, but can you describe some real life examples of your work in the human mobility context? Any anecdotes, something super, emotional that you remember? You are also traveling quite often and visiting those camps.
Absolutely. So everything that we do at Sesame is based on research. That's an integral part of our model. And part of the formative research that we did in developing our content was really to ensure that the stories that we were creating as part of the program were based on real lived experiences of refugee children. And one of the things that we learned was just how much refugee children carry in terms of big emotions that need to find ways of expression. And so we have a segment where Jad, this yellow orangey character here from Ahlan Simsim, where he's sitting with Basma, his new friend, and all of the characters are talking about toys from their childhood. And Jad doesn't have his childhood toy because he left it behind in Syria. And so we don't actually address explicitly the fact that he is a refugee from Syria. But from a child's perspective, we're able to really look at the situation of his longing for his toy, and his friend Basma, actually his favorite toy turns out to be a darbuka, a drum, and Basma makes that drum for him and presents it to him. But that story, or that storyline, really came out of formative testing and from hearing from children what they miss from their homes, and they miss their toys, they miss the things that they left behind. And so we really wanted to integrate that into the plot of the series so that children would be able to identify with real life stories that resonated with their experience.
Which leads me to the next question. From your professional experience, and it's a long one, how do immigration and displacement affect children? What did you see during your expeditions there, or working trips there? I don't know how to call them, because it's probably everything altogether.
Yes, I mean, the settings are so harsh in so many cases, as we just saw in that earlier clip at Cox's Bazar. But there is a joy and a love of learning and an excitement around being a child and playing that is so universal and so almost impossible to burst. And that is not just inspiring, but also really a window of opportunity. I mean, we know from research, and we've always known this at Sesame Street, that the early years are so important. But we now have scientific data to support just how critical those first few years of life are, how much neuronal activity takes place, and how many connections are formed, and how much those first 5 years of life in particular can have an impact on a child's future and their trajectory. So what we're really trying to do with our programming is to ensure that, notwithstanding all of the hardship that children are facing, that they have moments for playfulness, moments for joy and laughter, time to actually have a bit of a safe haven and to really be kids. And that's really what we're trying to give children. Yes, even if it's for a few moments a day where they're either watching the program or engaging with the materials around the content, but really able to explore this concept of playful learning, which we know is so critical to promoting healthy child development.
Wow, that's beautiful. How do these children react to the Sesame Workshop content? What do children and their families take away from it?
Well, some of the results remain to be seen. We are actually engaged in several summative evaluations of the work that we're doing. Of course, there are many anecdotes of how children react to the content, and the story I shared about just how clearly children who were watching the content, even from the very beginning when we were in the pilot phase, were overwhelmed with joy and excitement by seeing the characters. But really, we don't rest on our laurels, and that's why summative evaluation is such a key part of what we're doing. We actually are going to be doubling the number of studies on children and child development in emergency settings. And that's what is really so exciting about this initiative. Of course, it's a Sesame Street program. It's a children's show, and it has all sorts of other outreach components for direct service, but it's really more than that. What we're trying to create is a movement around the importance of focusing on early childhood in emergency settings, in places where human mobility and migration are taking place. The reality is that of all of the humanitarian assistance that's provided, only about 3% of that goes to education. And a small fraction of that goes to early childhood. So these, what I would call really mega initiatives, Ahlan Simsim project addressing the needs of Syrian refugees throughout the Middle East, and then our work in Cox's Bazar, Bangladesh with the Rohingya migration. These are really intended, of course, to address the needs of the children and the families that they're intended to reach. But more than that, we are really looking at creating the world's largest early childhood initiative in the history of humanitarian response. And that sounds really bold and big, but it is bold and big. And we really feel that as an organization that is so widely respected around the world for our history of more than 50 years of educational content, whether that's in a place like Bangladesh or throughout the Middle East and Israel, the work we've done with Rexov Sumsum, that there is just so much potential for impact. And we're going to take it as far as we can to really help ensure that children have the best chance in life to grow and to reach their highest potential.
I can only wish you to succeed in this super important goal, really, and reach as many kids and bring joy, even for a couple of moments.
Thank you,
I
Neda.
thank you, Daniel Leben, Vice President of International Projects at Sesame Workshops. Thank you so much for this. It's really inspiring.
My pleasure, and I wish I could be with everyone in person, but thank you for beaming me in this way. And I hope it's a great rest of the week with a lot of learning and a lot of action to follow.
Thank you very much.